Hey everyone, this is the introduction to cross contour drawing. I try to put the sources of where I get my imagery so that you guys can get this kind of going on better here. Okay. Hey everyone, this is the beginning of cross contour drawing. You guys will be familiar with this look and feel of contour drawing. These are mushrooms. So whereas contour drawing kind of shapes the outside or the edges of things, right? You can become more or less detailed, as you noticed in when I drew the earphones. Depends on how much detail you really want to include in your drawings. Cross contour, however, is a way of describing the volumetric conditions or shape of the thing that you're drawing. So whereas the contour is showing you the outside edges where one thing intersects or becomes another thing, the cross contour lines are lines that describe the topography of the object. The blue and red lines in this case would be the cross contour drawing lines. The black line would be the regular contour drawing. You can do this with all different types of objects. So what I'd like you guys to do is to find some objects around your house and create a small still life where you can do your cross contour drawings. You'll notice that these are sort of the fundamental shapes. You'll notice that these have these semi-cross contour drawings, but these are in some ways kind of trying to show you the ways in which those lines might seemingly continue around the backside or the unseen part of your drawing. So the cross contour lines can actually give you a really interesting effect on your drawing where it makes it look like it's real, kind of has volume, and it gives a sense of its depth. These are lines that are descriptive. So cross contour lines are they're mostly descriptive. Now these are more sketchy cross contour lines. For your drawings, I'm looking for something a little bit more methodical, because I'd like you to kind of notice the edges or the shape of the thing that you're attempting to draw. There's a lot of really cool ways you can use cross contour drawing for just kind of fun. These are just some examples of using pen and ink in a way that describes kind of like looks like a black hole of some kind, a nautilus type shell. Now this has a combination of cross contour lines and value or shadow, right? So you can kind of see how it's kind of shaded in toward the bottom. But these lines really give you an idea that it's almost like a little mountaintop from the top. This is a guy called Giorgio Morandi. He was an Italian artist, early 1900s. And he was really famous for doing these still lifes. It's kind of like all he did his whole life. They're really charming. They're really beautiful, very muted colors. And in some ways, like they're sculptural in some ways. So for example, it's not just a still life. More often than not, there are shapes that are organized with one thing in the middle, one thing behind, one thing in front. And so it's almost like this abstract organization of shapes on the picture plane, but then there's also this description of form. This is also Giorgio Morandi. This is an etching. These are lines that are not necessarily cross contour, but I wanted to show you this. This is actually a nice example of what's called optical value development, where you're using lines to represent different values of shadow and light. Here's another example. We'll do this next week. This is Louise Bourgeois, a really famous artist. She's done tons of work. She doesn't primarily do drawings. She does primarily like everything. She's a sculptor, installation artist. I mean, just really amazing artist. And you can see here how she has used some line work in this drawing to represent the volume of the body. This is another piece of hers, untitled. Another piece. So this is what you might call non-objective or abstract drawing. And it doesn't really have an object that it's referencing in the real world. It's just sort of referencing itself. It might look like something, or it might remind you of something, but it doesn't necessarily represent something in real life. This is a nice example of using cross-contour lines and varying the weight, the line weight. So if you notice, some of these lines get thinner as they kind of turn. If you look on the center of the back, you'll notice that some of those lines almost vanish, or they do vanish, and then they become a totally separate surface. And that small division offers up a visual line which separates the front part of the back and that back shoulder blade. I just thought this was a really cool example of using cross contour to make a really interesting kind of abstract drawing. Here's some more. If you'd like, you guys can do a drawing like this. Now this is more of a contour drawing, not a cross contour drawing, but I thought it was really nice the way some of the line work in the flowers tended to kind of go down a little bit. Like, in other words, not just the contour lines, but also there are some lines that hint at the volume of each one of these flowers. Cross contour can also describe shapes and forms in very interesting ways. This is kind of a scribbly style. This is with pencil. Another cross contour kind of abstraction. So to get to the nuts and bolts of how to do cross contour, I'll take an apple, for example. The apple, on the one hand, has a shape. It has the apple shape, right? So you could start out doing just a regular contour drawing of your form. And then slowly but surely, here's the blob exercise. Slowly but surely, you'll start to wrap the lines around your drawing to make it look like it has a volume or a form. You'll notice here that, especially on this, it looks like a lemon off to the right. You'll notice that some of the lines start out kind of thick and dark near the bottom. And then what happens is the pressure, the artist here lifted up a little bit of the pressure off of their pencil and then made some lighter marks. You guys can also use this to draw hands. So I picked a lemon from my tree, and I thought I would try to give you guys an example of, like, real life, what would cross contour drawing look like if things actually had lines. In this case, what I did is I just drew red lines from the stem all the way down and took a picture of it. Now, when I drew the lines, they were straight because I was holding it in my hand, and I was just simply drawing a line across the surface of the lemon. When I put it down and took a picture of it, that's kind of like drawing. So when we draw, we're not only drawing the thing, but we're also drawing a different point of view of the thing. And if in some cases you can draw that thing with an eye toward how that surface kind of vanishes around the kind of where it turns and goes out of sight, that can give the impression that it has more going on than meets the eye, right? This is a different orientation of the lines. I decided to make the lines kind of more parallel instead of coming from the top. But nonetheless, this is a cross contour drawing. So if you can imagine kind of drawing lines on the thing that you're set up for yourself to draw, this would be one of the ways that you could. I'm not saying draw lines on your stuff, but you could also do cross contour lines that crisscross. But I do want you to know that when you're drawing your cross contour lines, consider that in the background the lines might get a little bit closer, in the foreground a little bit farther, and that can indicate that there's a surface that's sort of receding into the background. And that's your cross contour examples.